You're standing over your hostas right now, and something feels off. The leaves that were so lush in June look tired. The edges are browning. The center of the plant seems to be slowing down, right when it should be storing up strength. And you're wondering if you missed something. You did. But it's not water, it's not too much sun. It's a single mineral your hostas are quietly starving for every August. And 2 spoons of a box you already have under your kitchen sink can fix it before the month is out. Most gardeners never hear this, because the loudest advice online tells you to just feed and mulch and hope. I learned the hard way, kneeling in my own beds, watching a plant I'd grown for 11 years shrink year after year, for no reason I could see. The fix traces back to soil science that university extension offices have quietly published for decades, and once I tell you the timing window, you'll never miss it again. And yes, this works on the big old hosta you've babied since your kids were small, not just the little ones from the garden center. So let me lean over the fence and tell you what took me 20 years to understand. Here's the first thing that shocked me. Your hosta isn't really working on this summer anymore. By the time August arrives, the leaves you're looking at are already finished growing. What the plant is actually doing, down in the crown where you can't see, is building next year. It's setting the buds, what we call the eyes, that will become every single leaf you get next spring. All of it. The whole show for the following year is being written right now, underground, in late summer. And that's the part almost nobody tells you. We treat August like the tail end of the season, like the plant is coasting to the finish. So we stop paying attention, we water a little less, we forget to feed, we let the beds go a bit wild because the big flush of growth is behind us. But for a hosta, this is the most important construction project of the entire year, and it's happening in silence. Now here's why that matters for what I'm about to tell you. Building those buds takes specific raw materials. Not just nitrogen for green leaves. Not just the general fertilizer we all reach for. It takes trace minerals, the tiny ones. The ones present in such small amounts that we assume the soil always has enough. And one of them in particular gets used up faster than the others and almost never gets replaced. That mineral is boron. And I promise you, most gardeners have never once thought about boron in their lives. I hadn't. I grew hostas for 2 decades before I even knew it mattered. But the plant knows, and when it runs short in August, right at the moment it's trying to form next year's eyes, it does something that breaks your heart in slow motion. It just builds fewer of them. So let me show you what boron actually does, because once you understand this, everything else clicks into place. Boron is what plants use to build cell walls and to move sugars around, and most importantly for us, to form new growing points. Think of it as the mineral of new beginnings. Wherever a plant is making something brand new, a bud, a root tip, a growing shoot, boron has to be present or the whole process stalls. The plant physiologists figured this out a long time ago. Boron is one of the 7 essential micronutrients that every plant on Earth has to have, and it cannot substitute anything else for it. No boron, no new buds. It's that simple and that unforgiving. Here's the cruel part. Boron doesn't move around inside the plant very well. Some nutrients, like nitrogen, a plant can pull out of an old leaf and shuttle over to where it's needed. Boron can't do that. Once it's placed, it stays put. So the plant is completely dependent on a steady supply coming up fresh from the roots, from the soil, at the exact moment it's building those crown buds in late summer. If the soil is short on boron in August, the plant can't rob it from somewhere else. It just makes do with less. And making do means fewer eyes for next spring. Now, how does soil run short on boron in the first place? This is where it got personal for me. Boron is one of the most easily washed away nutrients in the whole soil. Every time it rains hard, every time you run the sprinkler, a little boron leaches down past the roots and out of reach. Sandy soil loses it fastest, but even good loam loses it over the years. And here's the kicker. The more you water and mulch and baby your hostas, the more you may actually be flushing boron away. We're loving these plants into a slow deficiency and never knowing it. The University of Wisconsin Extension has written about boron leaching in sandy and heavily watered soils for years. Michigan State has noted it too. This isn't fringe science. It's standard soil chemistry that somehow never made the jump into everyday hosta advice. And I think I know why. Boron is dangerous if you overdo it. And I'll be dead honest with you about that in a minute. So, a lot of general guides just leave it out entirely rather than risk telling people a number. Safer to say nothing. But saying nothing is exactly why your hostas have been quietly declining. Let me tell you how I finally noticed. I had a big blue hosta, one of the old Siboldiana types, that I had divided from my mother's garden. Every spring it came up a little smaller. Not dying, just less. Fewer leaves, a looser, thinner clump. I fed it, I moved it, I mulched it. Nothing worked. And I couldn't figure out why a mature, established plant would keep shrinking in good soil. It made no sense. And that not making sense is the exact signature of a trace mineral problem, because everything you can see looks fine. So here's the tension I want you to sit with for a second. If your hosta is slowly getting smaller each year, or coming up with fewer leaves than it used to, or just seems to have lost its old vigor even though you're doing everything right, you may be watching a boron story unfold. And the window to fix it for next year is closing, because those buds are forming right now, in August, and once September turns cold, the plant locks in whatever it managed to build. But before you go dumping anything on your plants, you have to understand the single most important part of this, because getting it wrong does more harm than doing nothing at all. Here's the thing about boron that scared me off for years, and I need you to hear it clearly. The gap between too little boron and too much boron is incredibly narrow, narrower than almost any other nutrient. A plant needs it in tiny, tiny amounts, and just a little too much becomes toxic. Boron is actually the active ingredient in some old ant killers and weed killers, and that's not a coincidence. In high doses, it kills plants. So when I tell you 2 spoons, I need you to understand that the whole trick lives or dies on how you spread those 2 spoons out. This is why the box under your sink is perfect, and also why people get scared. Borax, the plain laundry booster, is roughly 11% boron. That's a gentle, dilute source, which is exactly what we want. We are not looking to pour a concentrated dose on the crown. We are looking to give the whole bed the faintest whisper of boron, spread as evenly and as thinly as we possibly can. Think seasoning a soup, not salting a driveway. That mental picture is the entire secret to doing this safely. So here's how I do it now. And I've been doing it this way for years with nothing but good results. I take 2 level tablespoons of borax, no more, and I dissolve them fully in warm water first. Because borax does not dissolve well in cold water, and you do not want undissolved grit landing in one spot. I stir it until the water runs clear with no crystals at the bottom. Then I pour that concentrated mix into a full watering can, and I top it up until I've got at least 2 gallons of solution total. Now, here's the critical number. That 2 gallons is meant to cover a big area, roughly 200 to 300 square feet of bed, not one plant, not one crown, a whole stretch of hostas. If you have just 2 or 3 plants, you'd use even less borax, maybe a single teaspoon in that same 2 gallons, and spread it wide. The goal is an even, gentle sprinkle over the soil around the plants, not a puddle at the base of any single one. I walk the bed and I keep the can moving the whole time, the way you'd water seedlings, never letting it dwell in one place. And I only do this once a year. Once. In late summer, boron is not something you keep adding. One careful application in August, when the plant is building next year's buds, and then you leave it alone until the following August. That restraint is the whole discipline of it. More is not better here. More is a dead hosta. I know that sounds like a lot of warnings, and I want to reassure you, because the warnings are exactly why this works when you do it right. The people who hurt their plants are the ones who eyeball a heaping scoop and dump it on one crown, because they figure if a little helps, a lot helps more. That's the mistake. You are smarter than that now. Measure it level, dissolve it fully, spread it wide. Once a year. Do those 4 things and you have nothing to fear and a great deal to gain. Now let me tell you what happens when you get it right, because this is the part that made me a believer. That old blue hosta from my mother's garden, the one that kept shrinking, the spring after my first careful boron feeding, it came up with noticeably more shoots. Not double, I won't lie to you, but clearly fuller, clearly more eyes pushing through the ground than the year before. And the year after that, fuller still. It had been starving for one specific mineral the whole time, and everything else I'd thrown at it, the fertilizer, the compost, the moving, none of it could fix a boron gap because none of it contained meaningful boron. I'd been treating the wrong problem for years, and that's the quiet tragedy I see in so many gardens. A beautiful, mature hosta that just isn't what it used to be, and an owner who has tried everything except the one thing the plant actually needs. Because who talks about boron? Nobody leans over the fence and says, hey, your hosta's short on a trace element. It's not the kind of thing that makes it into the pretty magazine articles. It got buried under the easy general advice that sells more bags of ordinary fertilizer. But here's where the tension ratchets up, because timing is everything now. It's one thing to know about boron. It's another to know that the window is open right this minute and closing fast. So let me tell you exactly why August, and not spring, and not fall, is the only month this really pays off. And if you're standing over that struggling hosta right now, feeling that quiet dread that you might lose a plant you've grown for years because nobody ever handed you the one word for what it needed, I want you to know that word is only the beginning. Everything I've learned about giving each plant exactly what it needs and exactly when lives in the collection I put together called the Complete Bloom System. First Bloom hands you the seasonal blueprint, so you know precisely what each plant needs and in which week. And Deep Roots gives you a plant-by-plant action calendar you'll reach for every single month, so your best plants stop quietly underperforming. It's more than 600 pages of real content, and here's how you can prove that to yourself for free tonight. Pick any one thing I taught you today, the boron ring at the leaf tips, and try it this weekend on your oldest clump, then watch what comes up next May. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this matters right now because the buds are forming this very month, and the timing window in the collection is what keeps you from missing it again next August. But before you decide, I want to answer the doubt I know some of you are having right now, because I had it too. If you feed boron in spring, the plant isn't building buds yet. It's unfurling the leaves it already made last year, and the spring rains will leach most of that boron away before the crown ever needs it. If you wait until fall, the buds are already set and the plant is shutting down, so you've missed the whole point. The buds for next year form in that late summer stretch, roughly from the middle of August into early September in most of the United States, and the United Kingdom, when the days are just starting to shorten and the plant senses the season turning. That shortening daylight is the plant's signal to start building the crown for next year. That is the exact window when boron in the soil matters most, because that is when the plant is spending it. Miss that window and you don't get a second chance until this time next year. The buds set in these few weeks are locked in. Whatever number of eyes your hosta builds in the next 2 or 3 weeks is exactly how full it will be next May. There's no fixing it in spring. Spring is too late. Spring is just watching the results of what you did or didn't do right now. So if you take nothing else from me today, take this. The plant you're looking at is a promise being written for next year, and you have a narrow chance to hand it the one ingredient it can't find on its own. That's the urgency. That's why I'm practically shouting this over the fence at you in August instead of saving it for a calmer time. But I know what some of you are thinking, because I thought it too. My hosta is huge. My hosta is old. My hosta has been in that same spot for 15 years. Isn't this trick just for the little ones, the fresh divisions, the new plantings? And I want to stop and talk to you specifically, because you are exactly the person this helps most, and I almost didn't figure that out in time. Here's the truth about a big, established hosta. The bigger and older it is, the more it has depleted the boron right around its own roots. It's been drawing on that patch of soil for years, pulling out the same trace minerals season after season, while rain has been washing them away from underneath. So the biggest, most beloved, most established clumps are often the ones running the lowest on boron. They're not too grand to need it, they're the hungriest of all. That shrinking blue hosta of mine was more than a decade old when it started to fade, and its age was the reason, not a protection against it. So if you've got a giant old hosta that used to be the pride of the border and has slowly gone thin in the middle or started throwing up smaller and smaller leaves, I want you to try this on that plant first. Here's how I handle a big, established clump specifically. Because the crown is wide and the feeder roots spread out well past the leaves, I don't pour anywhere near the center. I take my dissolved 2 gallons and I water the soil in a wide ring around the outer edge of the plant, out where the leaf tips reach and a little beyond, because that's where the active young roots are actually feeding. That ring is where the boron gets taken up. The middle of an old crown is mostly woody and doesn't absorb much anyway. And for a truly struggling old clump, one that's gone hollow or thin in the center, there's a second step I add in the same visit. That hollow center is usually a sign the crown has gotten congested and the inner growing points have died out. After I've done the boron ring, I make a note on my calendar to divide that plant early the following spring, just as the eyes push up, because giving the fresh outer sections room to breathe, combined with the boron they now have to build with, is what truly brings an old hosta roaring back. The boron feeds the buds, the division gives them somewhere to go. Together they revive a plant you thought was slowly leaving you. I've watched it happen with my own hands, and there's nothing like seeing a plant you'd half given up on come back fuller than it's been in years. So don't you dare think this is only for the new stuff. The plant with the most years in your soil, the one with the most sentimental hold on you, the one you'd be most heartbroken to lose, that's the plant that needs the boron ring the most. Start there. Start with the one you love. Now, there's one more thing I do alongside the boron that multiplies the effect, and this is where I want to bring in the calcium, because the two of them work as a team and almost nobody knows it. Boron's main job, remember, is helping the plant move and use calcium. And calcium is what builds strong cell walls in those new buds. So if you give boron but the soil is also short on calcium, you've only done half the job. The way I handle this is simple and cheap. In the same late summer window, I scratch a light handful of crushed eggshells or a small sprinkle of garden lime into the soil around each established hosta, well away from the crown, so the calcium is there and available for the boron to put to work. I don't overthink the amount, because calcium is far more forgiving than boron. A handful of crushed shells around a big plant is plenty. That pairing, a whisper of boron and a modest bit of calcium in late August, is the combination that took my hostas from surviving to genuinely thriving. The boron unlocks the calcium builds the buds, and the buds become next spring's leaves. It's a chain, and every link has to be there. For years I'd been giving nitrogen, which only feeds the green of leaves the plant already had, and wondering why the crown kept getting weaker. I was feeding the wrong end of the plant's calendar. But here's the question that kept nagging me even after I sorted out the boron and the calcium. How did the old growers know? Because they did know. This isn't something a lab invented last week. And when I finally traced where this knowledge came from, it changed how I thought about the whole thing. And that's the real secret I've been leading you toward. Boron as a garden treatment goes back further than most people realize. It was in the 1920s and 1930s that agricultural scientists first proved boron was an essential element for plants, not just a curiosity. Researchers at the University of California and other stations ran the trials that showed crops failing without it and reviving with the tiniest addition. That's when boron deficiency stopped being a mystery and became something a grower could actually diagnose and correct. And borax, plain household borax, was the cheapest, most available source of it. So that's what the old-timers reached for. The market growers, the ones raising vegetables and flowers for a living, quietly folded it into their routines. They knew that a dilute borax solution, used sparingly once a season, could correct the deficiency in crops that were prone to it. It became a known trick among people who grew things for their livelihood, passed hand to hand, grower to grower. But it never crossed fully into the world of ornamental gardening advice, because it carried that dangerous edge, that narrow line between help and harm, and the general garden books decided it was easier to leave boron out than to trust the home gardener with a number. So the knowledge existed. It was real, it was proven, it sat in the extension bulletins and the old growers' notebooks. But it got buried under simpler, safer, blander advice about watering and mulching and general purpose feed. The careful growers kept it alive, whispering it across their own fences. And now it's crossing over to you at exactly the right time of year for exactly the plant that needs it, because your hosta is building its buds this very month, and boron is the mineral of new buds. That's the whole hidden story in 2 spoons of borax. Not a gimmick, not a hack somebody made up for views. A genuine piece of soil science from the 1920s and 30s, preserved by working growers, matched to the one moment in the hosta's year when it makes all the difference. When I understood that, I stopped feeling foolish for never having heard it and started feeling grateful that I finally had. Let me pull it all together so you can walk out to your beds this weekend and do it without second guessing yourself. 2 level tablespoons of borax for a big bed, or a single teaspoon if you've only got a few plants. Dissolve it completely in warm water until there's not a crystal left. Top it up to at least 2 gallons. Spread it thin and wide over the soil, never dwelling in one spot, and on your big old established clumps, water it in a ring out at the leaf tips where the young roots feed, not on the crown. Add a handful of crushed eggshell or a light dusting of lime for the calcium. Do it once, now, in this late August window while the buds are forming, and then leave it alone for a full year. That's it. That's the whole thing. Simple enough to do before lunch, precise enough to actually work, and gentle enough to be safe if you respect the measurements. The plant does the rest, in the dark, in the crown, all through the fading weeks of summer, writing next spring one bud at a time. I think about that shrinking blue hosta from my mother's garden a lot. How close I came to composting it, convinced it had simply worn out, when the truth was it had been hungry for one specific thing the entire time and I just didn't know the word for it. It's full and strong again now, and every spring when it comes up fat with new shoots, I feel like I kept a promise, both to the plant and to her. That's what this is really about. Not gardening tricks. Keeping the living things we love from slipping away over something we could have fixed if only someone had told us in time, and that's you now. You're the gardener who refuses to lose a plant to bad advice, who wants to know the real reason, the actual mineral, the exact week. You've poured years into these beds. You've divided plants, moved them, worried over them through droughts and hard winters. You deserve to know the thing the pretty articles left out. So here's what I'd love for you to do. Tell me which hosta you're going to treat first. Is it a giant old clump that's gone thin in the middle, or a division from someone you love, or one that's just quietly shrunk on you these past few springs? Write it in the comments below. I read them and I answer, and tell me where in the world your garden is, because boron leaches faster in some soils than others, and I love knowing what everyone's working with, from a sandy bed in the south to heavy clay up north. If you're the kind of gardener who would rather learn the real science than lose a plant you've loved for years, then you're one of us, and I'd be glad to have you here for what's coming. Because next I want to show you the one thing to do to your hostas in the first cold snap of autumn that decides whether slugs shred them to lace next spring, and the timing on that one is even tighter than this. Stay close, keep your hands in the soil, and let's not lose a single plant we don't have to. Now, this video showed you why boron matters. But inside the Blooming Garden Circle, I pick up right where we just left off, walking you through the exact borax mix and timing for hostas. And in there, you can ask me your own question and I answer you myself, not some machine. You won't be alone either. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. Cancel anytime with one click. I'm Mary. Come join me. Now that your hostas are thriving, let me show you how to finally rid your garden of stubborn spurge weed and keep it from ever coming back. That video is starting right here, so stay with me.